Welcome back to another video on the basics of making 2D games in Unity. In this video we'll be looking at implementing a simple inventory system into our game. In this system we will be able to walk up to objects and press a key to interact with them, and if they are pick-upable or if there's something we want to go into our inventory, then we will store that object in our inventory and be able to use it later when we need it in our game. So we're going to start by making a brand new script for our skeleton here. That will be his inventory script where we will be storing all of our inventory. So we're going to go into our scripts folder here, create new C# script. I'm going to call this inventory. Alright, in our inventory script we need a place to store the objects that we're going to be picking up. So we're going to use a built-in Unity array. So up here at the top of the inventory script, let's make ourselves a public game object array, and we'll call this inventory. So this will be our array that holds all of our items. When we set this array up, we're actually going to initialize it by setting it to a new game object array, and then if we put a number in the parentheses here, we can determine the size. So this will make an array that has room for 10 items inside of it. So you can decide in your game how many items you want to be able to hold. If you're using a built-in Unity array like this, then you do need to specify its size, and once you make it, it's difficult to change its size. There's another way we could do this by using just a regular list, but for this one here we're going to use the built-in Unity array. So I'm going to initialize an array of size 10. If I save the script and go into Unity and add this to my skeleton, then we'll see what it does right away. So let's go find our scripts. Let's find that inventory script that we just made, and let's attach it to our skeleton. And you'll notice in the inventory script here we have our inventory array at size 10, and it's all initialized to be empty. So that all happened with that one line of code up there where we go back to mono develop here, where we did this line here that set that array up for us. So now we're all ready to go. I took out the update and start function because we won't need those currently in our inventory script. We are going to need a few functions though that will have to deal with adding something new to our inventory, later on being able to search through our inventory and see if we have an item, things like that. So let's start by making a function here that we can call when we want to add an item to our inventory. So we're going to call this public, and it won't be returning anything, so it's a void, and we'll just call this add item. We're going to need to know the item that we're adding, so we're just going to keep all these game objects for now. So we'll be bringing in a game object, we'll call it item, and then we want to add this to our inventory. Now what we need to do is we need to make sure that we have an empty space in our inventory to add our item to. And as we use these items and move them around, there could be holes in our inventory as well, where we have empty items in the middle of other slots that have items. So we need first of all to find the first open slot in our inventory. So that's what we're going to do here. So that's just going to be as simple as looping through the array, our inventory array, and looking for a spot that doesn't have anything in it. So we're going to do a for loop. So we're going to say for I int equals 0, I less than our inventory dot length. That'll let us loop all the way through. And then every time we do the loop, we're going to check to see if inventory at I position is equal to null. Null means empty. So We're looking for an empty spot in our inventory. So if we find one, if this is true, then this current slot in our inventory is empty, and this is where we're going to add our item. So then we would just say inventory at that position, I position, is going to be equal to our item. And since item is a game object, and this array holds game objects, that'll be just fine. We're just going to store the game object right there. Let's just give ourselves a little bit of feedback to make sure this is actually working here. So let's do a debug.log where we say, let's give the item's name. So let's say item.name, and then we'll say was added. All right, so that'll give us some feedback. Then what we want to do next is we want to do a break command. What break means inside of a loop is stop running the loop. So we're going to exit the loop right here. If we didn't do this, we continue to loop through, and we would add that one item to every slot that's empty in our inventory, and we'd end up with a whole bunch of them. So we just want it to happen one time. So as soon as we find an empty slot, then we're going to break out of the loop, and it'll quit running. Okay, so that's what happens if we found an empty slot to put in our inventory, but let's handle the case of the inventory was full and we didn't find one. So we got all the way through the loop here, we exit out the bottom of the loop here, and inventory was full. So we're going to need a little variable here that we can use to check to see if the item was actually added to our inventory at some point here. So up here at the top of our function, let's just declare a boolean, so a bool, and we'll call this item added. We'll set it equal to false because we haven't added the item yet. Then what will happen is when we find an empty slot and we add the item, we'll go ahead and toggle this to true. So here we'll say item added equals true. And then at the bottom here, after we exit the loop, so the loop exits here, if we made it all the way through and never found an empty space, this will still be false. Now we can ask a question after we exit the loop. If item was not added, so here's our exclamation point in front of a boolean again, that means not. So if not item added, so basically it means if item added is false. If it was false, then inventory was full. So let's just do a debug.log here. That tells us that the inventory is full. Item not added. Okay. So that should make it so that we can add an item, and then we will have the item in our inventory. All right, let's save that. Let's go out here and test this now. So basically we're going to have to make a call to this when we're near to an object that we want to add to inventory. We're going to have to make some changes now to our items script here. So our interaction object script here, we're going to have to add a little more information because this item is going to have to know if it can actually be stored in inventory or not. And so when we come to interact with it, we're going to have to basically check to see what is it that we're supposed to do with this object. So let's go to the script here for our interaction object. Here's our interaction object script. Right now it just has this do interaction function in it that turns its game object off when we interact with it. But we're going to want to add a few pieces of information here that these objects will be able to keep track of some things. So let's start adding some of that in. So let's do some public variables here. Let's do a public bool, and let's call this inventory. So basically we're going to put a bool here to say whether or not this object can be added to inventory. Let's put a little note on here. Let's say if true, this object can be stored in inventory. Alright, so let's do that so that we know if this object can be stored in our inventory. Okay. Then what we're going to want to be able to do, let's save that. Let's go out to our key, and in our interaction script now we have this checkbox for inventory. So as we're setting up our items, we can decide, hey, is this an inventory type item? So the key is an inventory item. I want to be able to pick it up and put it in my inventory. So I'm going to check the box. That'll set that to true. So now my key is something that I want to be able to pick up. So now we need to go back to our player script, and we want to be able to add a little bit into our interaction here. Okay, so right now when we push our interact button, which was the E key, and we currently had an object, we were sending a message to it to do its interaction. Well, before we do that, we want to actually find out, is this an object that I should store in my inventory? So let's do a check to see if this object is to be stored in inventory. So to do that, we're going to need to be able to reach into this object's script and check the value of its inventory boolean, so we know if this should be done or not. So what we're going to do here is, since we're going to be having to get more and more information from the actual script of the object, let's actually start keeping track of that object. So the current interactable object here, we're going to want to have a link to its script. So let's make another public variable, but this time I want a variable that can hold the instance of this object script. And the object script is called interaction object. So here's the script, interaction object. So I want to declare a variable that can hold that, and we'll call this our current inter script. Okay, so we'll do that, and in the beginning we'll just go ahead and make sure we don't have one in there, so that it's empty. We make sure we have to assign one for something to happen. So what's going to change now is not only are we going to be getting our current interactive object here, but we're also going to now want to grab its script and assign it to our current interObject script variable. So down here, let's add in this. We'll send our current interObject script equal to, we're going to go to our current interactive object, which we just stored here above, and we're going to say dot get component. So we want to get a component from that. We put the type of component in some angle brackets here, so what we want is the interaction object script. Okay, this guy right here, we're going to store an interactive object script in there, and that's what we're going to set it equal to. So basically we're saying, okay, we're storing the game object here, but let's also at the same time reach into that current interactable object. Let's get its script and store it in this variable we have for that. So this will save us a lot of typing get component commands in later, and get component commands do take a little bit of time to execute on the computer, so this will make sure we're just really doing it one time when we first pick up a new object. Okay, now that we have that done, what we're going to do here is check to see if the object is to be stored in the inventory. Now that we have a link to its script, we can do a check for that. So we can say if, and let's paste in current interactive object script, and if I say dot, I can get any public variables from the script here now. So I can say inventory. So now I'm basically asking the question, go to the current interactive object script, look at its inventory Boolean variable. This will return either a true or false depending on what that's set to. Currently my key is set to true. This will return a true, so this will basically become true, and if statement becomes true here, then we can do some commands. So if it is an inventory object, then what we want to do now is we want to go and add this to our inventory. So we're going to need to send this to our inventory script. Okay, so again, we're going to want to add in a link from our player interaction script to our inventory script. It's on the same game object, as the script. So let's make ourselves a public link to that. That's called inventory. So I'm going to make a variable here that can hold an inventory script. I'm going to call this lowercase I inventory. And then I'm just going to, right away up here at the top, I'm going to get component, and I'm going to say inventory with a capital I, which is the name of my script, and we're going to store that inside of there. Let's see if Unity likes me doing that at the time I declared the variable. It did not. Okay, so it doesn't like that on line 9. Alright, so we're going to set the storage space up here. Alright, so now we have a place to hold a link to an inventory script that we're going to call inventory. Now that I made a place to hold this inventory script, let's save the script. Let's go out here and establish that connection. Clear that stuff out of my console. Alright, so on my skeleton, who is my player, he's got this inventory script, and now in his player interaction script, he's got a place to hold a link to that script. So I'm going to be grabbing the script here and dropping it in right here. So this just establishes a link between these two scripts so that I can now add things to my inventory from my player interaction script, and I can ask the inventory if it has an object, all these different interactions back and forth. We're just establishing a link here so these two scripts can talk to one another. Now that I've established that link, I can go back into my script now, and if this object that we want to pick up is something that can be added to inventory, if that is true, then we want to add it to inventory. So if you remember, we made a function over here, a public function called addItem that takes a game object, and its whole job is to add that item to our inventory. So we're going to call addItem. So from over here, we're going to say inventory, which is my link to my inventory script, dot, and then I can say add item, and then I can tell it which item I want. The item I want it to add is my current interactable object. So I can just send it that. Okay, current interactable object. That will send my currently selected object, in this case our key, over to the inventory script. It's going to store it right here under item, and then it's going to go through and see if there's an empty spot. If there is, it will add it and tell us that the key was added. So let's make sure everything's saved. Let's test this out now. We should be able to actually add this to our inventory and see it pop up over here in our inventory script. So we're going to hit play. I'm looking at the skeleton, and his inventory script is here. Let's walk him over to the key till we know, there we are, we have the key. Let's hit the E key, and you notice the key disappeared and it was added to our inventory. So right here it says key was added, and if you look in our array here, you see in slot number 0 here, our key was indeed added to our inventory. So we now have a link to the key. If I click there, it tells me that it's this key right here in our scene, which is currently turned invisible, right? Remember, we're just turning that off because once we pick it up, we don't want to destroy it because we're going to want to use it later, and it may have information in its script that we need. So we don't want to destroy it and get rid of it. So we're just going to turn it off so that it doesn't interact with anything in the scene anymore, and it looks like we picked it up. So we have indeed now added the key to our inventory. So that is basically how we can make a simple inventory system where we can add items to our inventory. For instance, if I go to this potion here, and all I have to do is make sure I tag this as an inter object so it can be interacted with, and give it the interactable script here, the interactable object script. And if I check that this can also be an inventory item, I have to make sure it has a collider on it, right? Because we're triggering by the collider. So let's click on him here, and he does have a 2D circle collider that's marked as a trigger, and it's set far enough out that if our player walks near it, it should go. So we should now be able to actually pick up both the key and this item because we've done all the hard work making it work for the key. So now you just got to set your other items up to do the same thing. So let's save my scene here, and hit play, let's see if I can pick both of these items up. And I'm going to go to my skeleton so we can see his scripts here. And then we're going to walk up to this potion. And you notice down here it says potion blue. I'm within range. If I hit the E key, the potion disappears, potion blue is added, and there it is in element 0. If I go down here to my key now, there I'm in range of the key, and I hit the E key there, you notice the key was added and now it's in the second slot in my array, element 1. So now I can keep going along and picking up items until I run out of space, at which point it's going to give me the message that my inventory was full and that the item was not added. One more thing that we need to fix then in our code is right now when we pick up something, we are sending this message do interaction. So this is happening regardless of if we were able to add the inventory item. So we probably want to make sure that this doesn't disappear if we weren't able to add it to inventory for some reason. So what we probably want to do here is move this command from here. So I'm going to cut it. Let's actually put it over here in the inventory script. We have a link to the item that we're adding here through item. So if we found the item, let's also at this point tell it to do its interaction effect. So it's not known as current interObject here, it's actually known as item. So let's just change this to item. And so what we can do now is we can say, okay, this item that we just added to inventory, let's send it a message to do its interaction before we break out, and that will cause the item to disable itself so that it doesn't, so it disappears. And if for some reason our inventory is full, this will never get called. And so it'll just sit right there in our scene like we want it to, because maybe then we give our player the option to go in and manage his inventory, drop an item, or use an item to free up some space. Okay, so let's save these scripts here. And let's go back into Unity, make sure we don't have any big errors in here that we need to deal with. Okay, and again, it should still work just fine. When I go to pick up the key, it disappears and gets added to my inventory. When I go to pick up the potion, it disappears and goes into my inventory. So that all works. So as you probably see, adding inventory and interaction objects can be kind of a complex topic. We're going to stop this video right here with the next chunk. So far we've looked at how to walk up and know that we're within range to interact. We've set up a key to interact with the object, and now we've set up a real simple basic inventory system that allows us to add an object to our inventory. In the next video, we'll take a look at being able to use objects or set objects up that that need another object to be interacted with. For instance, I have a door dropped into my scene, and in the next video, we'll look at how we can make it so that the door will only open if we have picked up the key first. So that'll add a little more complexity to our interactions with objects in the game. And as always, thanks for watching. Leave comments below if you have any questions or other ideas for how we might build a system like this. Thanks for watching.